Good evening, and welcome to Drie Bokke, a Ball BlitzBOD. We have a very special show for you tonight. It's a 2-hour special. You haven't got to put up with me for 2 hours, you lucky devils. The Leinster boys are going to be joining us near the end, and we're going to have a bit of banter with them around the Rugby World Cup draw, and also feed into their show that's going to follow ours. So very exciting, bit of a new thing for us. But we've got two very special guests for you tonight, both from Western Province. Both have a lot to say about current Currie Cup issues, current Western Province issues, and the state of the game in the country. So without further ado, let me introduce the first man to you. This is the time on the show, if I can count past two, which I hope I can. He is as much of a Western Province hero off the field as he is on it. He is the former president of Villagers and is a massive advocate for club rugby in Western Province. His name is Anton CHAIT. How are you, sir?
I'm all good, thank you, Andy. All the better from hearing from you.
You're such a liar. But I'll take it. The second man tonight is I hate to say it, Anton, he's probably a bigger Western Province legend than you are, I'm afraid. 50 plus games for Eastern Province before going to Western Province. 136, as he's told me off air. He is, I think, 9th on the all-time list of Western Province caps, but certainly the most for any hooker. And he is also a man that can do this.
Again, Hardy with a pull in again. Some good scrumming from his team. Something to see that long pass again out of Pagano. And he's broken through again. Looking to pick up on the inside. He's got Anton. And that is one spot with Patterson. A beautiful time on Western Province. Lovely running by Pagano. He saw the inside gap and he took it.
He is, of course, legendary Western Province hooker, Mr. Andrew Patterson. How are you, sir?
Fine, thank you.
Good man. It's great to have you on the show. Really pleased to have you on the show. We've decided to play a little game with you before we start. We're sort of put a story behind the picture. I know you sent a few through today, and I'm looking forward to hearing a few stories behind some of these pictures that Joe's going to bring up for us right now. So if you could, that'd be great.
That was 1992. Western Province played against France. The guy busy tackling there is Leon Rocky. Back left is Olivier Romar. They turned out to be one of the best players ever. In that particular game, Jeff Torteau got quite a hectic injury. But what was just nice, it was a rainy day, and I just remember the game was over in a couple of seconds, and we lost, I think, 15-12, if I remember correctly. Andrew Aitken on the left, he's in Australia. Gary Pagel on my right-hand side, Skalkberger Jr., Louis Blom had also played quite a few games for Province in the background. Oh, that was a special picture. I think most hookers think a lot about the scrums. That was Gary Pagel on the right and Keith Andrews, a gentleman by the name of Richie Ryle, who was a former Springbok wicketkeeper. He was a very good painter, and he did that painting for us a few years ago, which was really nice. That's another one at the Old Newlands. It was Chris Butcher. He played for England, if I remember correctly, Anton, and he played a couple of seasons for the Sharks. And on my left-hand side is Theon Strauss, most games ever for Province, 156. He was probably the most toughest and most consistent player I've ever played with. He just gave 100% every day. Unfortunately, didn't make the World Cup team in '95. Went to Australia and they won it in 1999. But a real legend and a true Western Province player. Forwards again, that's Marius Herta on the left, myself, Gary Pagel, and the one and only Dick Muir, which Anton CHAIT can tell you a bit about. That was actually a Chester Funerals wedding where there were probably more people there than watched most of the Province games the last couple of years. But a good thing with his photographs is that we've remained friends, good friends, after a number of years having played the game. There's also a good friend of mine, Garth Wright. He played for Eastern Province. He ended up playing about 92 games for Province. And I'm sure Anton will agree with me. He was one of the best scrum halves ever, particularly he played behind a difficult pack that struggled. And he was, without a doubt, the most hard-working guy I've ever played with and loyal guy I've ever played with before. So it was some nice memories there.
That's awesome. So awesome. What I loved about those two videos, though, was the old school nature of it. You just destroy the British and Irish Lions front row, you'll just stand up and shrug your shoulders, whereas now the fullback runs in, jumps, high fives everyone, and pats it on the back. And then you score a worldie of a team try, just little fist pump, which you probably got stick for over celebrating back in the day, and then just run back to a steep kickoff. I love that. But let's just start quickly on the Currie Cup as it is now and as it was then. Just, I don't know, just describe to us what the Currie Cup meant to when both of you played. We'll start with Anton because he's a bit older. So we'll go back at it.
I'm not actually.
Actually, it's younger. Anton's actually younger.
I was just going off hair. Sorry, And but when I'm going to sort of like reminisce a little bit from my own personal stuff. I used to watch a program on a Saturday morning called Trans World Sport, and I know there'll be a lot of people watching this now going, I remember that. And it used to cover Currie Cup, and I used to watch these like guys in orange shirts playing against these guys in blue and white shirts in front of 50,000 people, and beating the living daylights out of them on the driest pitch I've ever seen. But it looked immense. There was a huge aura. Anton, give us a sense of what Currie Cup used to be back in the day.
Yeah, Andy, just before I talk about the Currie Cup, I just want to say that thank goodness there was a try line there for that try of Andrew Patterson, because if there hadn't have been a try line, I think he would have landed up in the cheap seats because he got a speed wobble. I don't know if you noticed on his way to scoring the try. Anyhow, yeah, Andy, the Currie Cup was an unbelievable and pretty much still is an unbelievable competition. It used to be strength versus strength. All the Springboks used to play. You know, one week you could very well be playing with a Springbok, and the next week you could be seeing him playing for his club side. That's what rugby was about in those days. Very much an inclusive sport from an ability point of view. So there wasn't this whole separation where you had professional rugby players on a pedestal. Amateurs, it was amateurs throughout. And as you said earlier, seeing 50,000 people at Newlands for a Western Province Transvaal or Western Province Northern Transvaal or Western Province Free State game was the norm, you know. We didn't have much TV in those days. The coverage wasn't as great. We weren't spoiled for choice over the weekend. And a Currie Cup game was the event of the weekend from a rugby point of view. So I agree with whatever you said earlier. It was awesome. It was awesome to watch, and it was awesome to be part of.
And Andrew, for you, some memories from, well, you started off at Eastern Province, obviously, and then moved down this way. But you must have, that's what we're looking at here, nearly 200 games. I mean, you must have some stories from back in the day for us.
For sure. But just touching on Western Province, out of all the stadiums I ever played in Western Province was unbelievable. And I remember before one of the games, I was walking on the field in the tunnel, and Fafa Knutzer was the centre, and he's a very polite chap. And him and Keith Andrews came up to me and we were chatting. And they just said it's the best place to play. You must come here one day. You must come and play for Western Province one day. It was just unbelievable. As Anton said, it was sold out week after week. And you only respect that or appreciate it when you've played like in a place like Eastern Province, where if you lose, the people don't come and watch. And if you do play well, the people do come and watch, and they come like in droves. So it's a bit up and down. But when you saw the whole setup at Western Province, you realize why they've won so many Currie Cups, the depth, how they trained, practice. No, it was special memories that whether it was Northern Free State, it was full. Whether it was Transvaal, it was full. Free State, it was full. And it was so exciting running on seeing all those people. It was wonderful. Anton played in 1989. He played, I think, about 10 or 15 games roundabouts there. And I remember how we never had team talks before the game because we all knew what to do. Anton? There weren't huge team talks. Carl would look around and he'd say, there's nothing to talk about. Let's go and do it. We were knowing the practices already. We were going to win. There's no question about it. It was amazing.
That was the famous shared final of '89. Is that right? Northern Transvaal.
That's right.
That's it.
That's
right.
right.
Yeah. 16 all.
That's right.
Rian Post, Mr. Kick.
Let's look at today's Currie Cup. I think it would be harsh for us to compare this one completely. I think the next one will be, I don't know if it'd be more meaningful, but more standalone. Obviously, this has come off the back of a sort of bastardized Super Rugby title. Have we got a chance now to resurrect the Currie Cup a bit? We're not going to get back to 50,000 people by the middle of next year, but have we got a chance to get the provinces back up with where the franchises are now?
Anton?
You want me to answer?
Yeah.
Look, Andy, I think, as you said, it's been a hell of a difficult year. What's so pleasing for me to see is that it's strength versus strength. So what I mean by that is that your Springboks are playing in the Currie Cup. So when your Springboks play in the Currie Cup, there is going to be more crowd support and there's going to be more interest. What saddens me this year in particular with COVID and the challenges that, all the unions have got, is that people aren't as interested as they used to be, because watching a rugby game on TV with no spectator support is I find it difficult to watch. It's just not the same. And I think that's a challenge that we're going to have to address.
Yeah, Andrew, for you, do you think can we get some magic back in this Currie Cup eventually?
I agree with Anton. The people want to watch the best players playing, and I think you water it down by not playing the best players, and it definitely loses something. I think, Anton, another thing is there's too many teams playing. That's just my own opinion. It's got to be strength versus strength. And I know that's a good question. This has come for a couple of years now, and I think the attendances of the game is an indication that the people aren't keen on the rugby anymore. And this has been coming for a while, but I think definitely there is a place for it. Those isolation years, as difficult as it was, the North-South were like unofficial test matches. There were South African universities where South African Defence Force, SA schools was the big thing. The club champions was like huge, and all of that is just quietly dying away. But on a positive note, the Varsity Cup's been good. That to me has been exciting. Somehow that there's been magic there.
Yeah, I think the schoolboy rugby is still very much a shining light in this country, and Varsity Cup, I agree. It's one of the few things in rugby that is still excellent, in my opinion. But yeah, Andy, I think the marketers, the people who are responsible for marketing the game at SA Rugby, they're going to have to think carefully about the future and how they're going to draw spectators to stadiums.
So speak to me from a club perspective, Anton. Have the clubs lost connection with the provinces themselves, or have they lost connection because of the professional franchises? I know essentially they sit together, but we know they are two separate entities.
Totally.
Is there a disconnect here somewhere?
I mean, Andy, most clubs, and I can only speak about Villages. I mean, our annual budget at Villages is probably 20% of what a guy like Peter Steph du Toit earns a year. Sorry, they're asking us to switch our phones off.
Yeah, there's echo coming from a phone, one of our phones. I'm not sure who it is. If somebody's got it, the connection on.
Okay, mine's off.
Yeah, keep going. We'll be all right.
Yeah. So Andy, there's definitely a disconnect. There's a huge gap between what goes on in the professional environment compared to the amateur environment. So yeah, clubs today don't see the professional players at all playing in their system.
Yeah. Speaking of trying to reconnect, there's a man who's got a big job to do up in your very first province, Andrew, Eastern Province. Firstly, obviously Peter's going to take over. Peter Villiers is obviously taken over. But first, can you just touch on? I hear so many people say to me that the Eastern Province is the biggest drain of talent. There's so much talent there, and it's never used, and it's never. What is the rugby landscape like in Eastern Province, and should they be up there with the rest of them, shall we say?
No question about it. I left in 1988 was my last season, and in that specific year, I left, Under Straydon left, Henny LaRue left, Donnie Gerber left 2 years later. There was like an exodus of players then already. I think the talent is definitely there. You've seen in the Springboks and Pimpy, all those guys playing are all basically from the Eastern Cape schools. The Eastern Cape schools are fantastic. Dale, Gray, Selborne, and Andrews have all got brilliant youngsters coming through. And it's been disappointing that those guys can't stay there. So I think Peter's got a huge challenge. He needs lots of support to get where he is, but with hard work and obviously need some good players. I think Eastern Province can get back. There was a resurgence when Alan Solomons was there. After 3-4 games they won, that place was full. So the old Boeterasmus Stadium as well. We had good support there in tough times. But I just think the last few years, I mean, in that Pro 14, I'm speaking under correction, I think there were 21 games played and they lost 20, which is a huge worry. You know, I'm not blaming anybody. The results speak for themselves. And if I'm a young player, Eastern Province wouldn't be on my agenda now to create a future. I would certainly want a good group of players to go. Then I'm sure, Peter, that's first on his agenda, to get a good squad, a nice, well-balanced squad. And you want, because if I was a youngster, yes, you don't want to go there because it's a problem. But if I can get a chance to play, I would rather play for EP than sit on the bench at the Sharks or sit on the bench somewhere else. So I think there's definitely opportunity there. It's a beautiful stadium. I was fortunate enough to watch a few tests there the last couple of years. So the table is laid. I think businesses, even though they're taking strain, want to get involved. They want to be part of the success story. So I'm looking forward to some positive change, which is really long overdue.
Anton, we spoke about this briefly last week. Like, sorry, there's not a lot of budget flying around at the moment at all. In fact, there's next to none. So people are just trying to stay afloat. That's for COVID and also, but historically the way provinces have been run. How beneficial do you think a loan system in South Africa could be to enhance individual players, but take EP Elephants as an example? They could be loaning players in, paying half wages, whatever, however you do the deal. Should we look at more loan systems in this country?
100%, Andy. You've probably got players at unions like the Bulls, Sharks, Western Province, and the Lions who their fourth or fifth choice, who would be first choice at the Pumas or Griquas or EP. So I think SA Rugby needs to develop a model or a system. And as you say, it could be on a 50% of what the unions, but what's very important, I think, is that players get exposure. And if they can get exposure at a union that would play them more regularly than the union they contracted to, then why not put them on loan? It can only be of benefit to both unions, because the player that they're paying as a contracted player, let's call it his home union, he'd be getting game time at another union, and the union that would be paying a portion of his salary would be getting the benefit of his services, as he would be a better player than what they've got. So I'm very much in favour of a loan system.
Yeah, and if there was a loan system, Andrew, and how important is it that Eastern Province qualify for this? I mean, I've heard rumours of figures of the cash injection that comes from Sari for qualifying for this Currie Cup, but how beneficial to Eastern Province Rugby would that be? And it sounds like a really obvious question because of financial. Any financial injection is going to be fantastic, but let's go back to the structures, let's go back to the development, let's go back to the schools and the clubs where that could potentially be filtered down if the money goes into the right hands. Are we looking at like a complete revolution on the cards here, or are we just, maybe I'm being a bit romantic about it?
Andy, I think Patty spoke about EP under Alan Solomons. They had a very good run in the Super Rugby at one stage. And I think what was so impressive then was that they got their academy system right. They really started working with Nelson Mandela University. And I think Robbie Kempson in those days was running the academy solely. That was his full focus, while Solly focused on the professional team. So I think if they can get the academy system right together with a draft or loan system, because it's a wonderful place to play rugby, Port Elizabeth, I don't see why any youngster wouldn't go there and try and further his career, provided that Peter creates the right environment, which I have no doubt he will.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Andrew, for you, how important is it that Port Elizabeth and the Eastern Province have a team that's in the Currie Cup?
No, it's huge. He's desperate for good news. Desperate. They've got very loyal supporters, and with any flinch of good news, they will come back in droves. A lot of it's an automotive city. Obviously, a lot of vehicles are manufactured there, and a lot of people are desperate, as I said, for good news. And I think the clubs as well are taking strain. So they're looking for Peter to flick a switch, and it will be a revolution, to be honest. That stadium in Solly was playing filled up quickly. And it was week after week, and it was just packed. It was like a groundswell of support week after week, and they were competitive. I agree with Anton, they had a good academy, they were fit, they were well drilled, and they stood up to all those big teams, and there were a number of people coming through in all positions. So they can get that energy and process back and get back to playing rugby and less politics. I think it will be fantastic. I really do. I'm looking forward to seeing its progress.
Yeah, let's hope it definitely moves in that direction. I think we've got a good question from Neil about aggressive South Africans. Maybe can I ask a generous question? Where does that aggression come from? I think he's definitely talking to you, Andrew. A lot of other teams depend on systems, whereas the Boks have that skill, but always start combatively. There we go. Is that in the genes? Andrew, you're going to have to answer that as a hooker. You can't ask a footballer.
Without a doubt, I was watching Chasing the Sun, and Springboks are renowned for being passionate and in your face and aggressive. And when you hear other teams often start writing books, they didn't like playing against South Africa, and we try and play all these different styles, and that is our best style, that physical approach, those big scrums, doing your basics well. That has been a revelation. I think it must be tempered and pointed in the right direction. But yes, it is a South African thing, but it works. My goodness, it works. Anton will tell you, in the old days at Province, with those packs dominated, he was a backline player. Nothing gives a back more energy and belief with a pack just rolling forward, Anton, and big tackles. And I think it's definitely a South African thing, but it must be channeled correctly and positively.
Did Anton run the other way when it kicked off as a back, or was he in there? You can tell me, Andrew. It's fine.
Anton actually pulled a hamstring once, believe it or not. Anton actually pulled he pulled a hamstring once on the field, and he just kept dead quiet. And he practiced in tracksuit pants for the whole week. And he made it. I think we still scored against Free State, or Anton and the backs of the Duplessis brothers still scored about 6 or 7 trials. I think, Anton, how many trials did you score in your game that you played?
Well, the backline scored 15 or something.
15.
Yeah, but I'm not sure how much that had to do with me.
The old hamstring trick. I was going to cover your back, Andrew, but I just couldn't get there in time.
No, he used three rolls of tape. His tape looked like a mummy. That left leg of his looked like a mummy.
We all did that. It was always our excuse as players, wasn't it? I would have got there.
Yeah.
But you can tell the tape. I need the tape. Guys, don't forget, the Leinster boys are joining us in about 25 minutes. We're going to have a crack with them, which is going to be amazing, and we've never done that before, and that's going to be awesome. But we are going to get down to the crux of our show this evening. These gentlemen live and breathe Western Province, and I am sure they are quite perturbed at what is happening, not just on the field, but off the field at the moment. Anton, let's start on the field, but is on the field suffering because of what is off the field? Again, probably another obvious question, but it's, let's be frank about it, it's a bit of a shit show at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, Andy, I think that's putting it mildly. I really feel for John Dobson and his coaching staff and the management. It can't be easy reading about your province every weekend on the front page of the newspapers. You know, and people you bump into say Western Province always in the newspaper for the wrong reasons. So the leadership, unfortunately, of the union have been left somewhat wanting, and they need to be held accountable. And because of this this unbelievable scenario we have at Western Province, where 99 clubs control what happens at the union. In other words, they elect the president and the executive. Those clubs are now in control of what happens at the union, and I'm very pleased to see that the new chairman, Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool, announced yesterday that there's going to be now a formal split once again between the professional arm and the amateur arm. The amateur arm being the shareholder within the professional arm.
Yeah,
So against that backdrop, you must understand that for a coach and his management team, as well as the players, to function optimally is very, very difficult.
Yeah. For you, Andrew, is it tough to watch? I mean, there's a lot of Springboks in that team.
It's sad.
Just talking on the pitch is difficult.
Yeah, no, it's a big worry to see what's unraveling. It's just not good. And everyone talks about, as Anton said, it's all for the wrong reasons. And for coach like John Dobson, where it's just relentless week after week, is a big worry. I don't think anyone really knows what's going on. But people are distancing themselves. The more people I speak to, more people aren't going to renew season tickets for next year. People are fed up. So the timing hasn't been good. So we just hope and remain positive that good sense will prevail, and we can get some good leadership in and relief back to the supporters and the players, more importantly.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like I suppose I can say these things on the outside looking in, but if you were to look on a certain person's Twitter profile, it says that they are a tax advisor, which in my opinion doesn't qualify you to run a province in the way it is. But my question to Anton is, how involved are the clubs at the moment? Actually, how involved are you as a collective in making decisions within Western Province Rugby? Well, let's call it the clubs, the amateur side of it.
So So, Andy, the clubs are involved insofar as they vote for resolutions. In other words, the clubs will be called to a general council meeting. They'll be given an agenda, and they will then have to vote for a certain. So, for example, the flight property deal. That's a very good example. Certain of the clubs, certain of the deal of the century, as our president called it, yeah, which has now collapsed, as you've read. Certain of the clubs voted in favour. In fact, 80% of the clubs voted in favour of that deal, and 20% of the clubs didn't. Now, those clubs that voted in favour of the deal need to hold themselves and the executive or the president liable for not performing. It's like any business. If the CEO makes a decision based on what he's told the staff in a business, and that decision fails and continues to fail, and the mistakes are being made over and over, he needs to be held accountable by the board. And I think that's what's happening now, Andy. I think we're seeing the same people that voted for these various initiatives to happen, and they now see them failing. They're now going to start getting a little bit unhappy with the performance of the leadership. I'm trying to be as...
Why has it taken so long?
Because I think certain promises were made or undertakings were made as an election campaign, like any president of a country would make. And much like that, the guys who were running made certain promises to their constituents, and they haven't come through on those promises. And now there's real unhappiness behind the scenes.
Yeah. Andrew, for you, where do the Stormers sit within the Western Province? Do you have, when you watch a Stormers game, do you get the same feeling as you do with Western Province, or do you just see it as the portal effect of the game going professional?
Personally, for me, I enjoy the Stormers, particularly at the opposition is at another level completely. So you're playing against overseas people. Looking at the amount of people coming to watch, there's definitely a heightened interest in the game. So I enjoy it, and I think it's been a good thing. But the big thing for me, like you mentioned earlier before we were on air, is to see different opposition or top opposition from other countries play, and that was wonderful. So as much as I enjoy watching the Stormers play, I loved watching Bowden Barretts and those classy wingers, and Aaron Major, that was a while ago, playing. I thoroughly enjoy watching their styles of play. So that to me was good. It was almost like many test matches every week, because it was like some really good teams playing. So I would say yes, a big connection, and it was a great thing, and very much so. I think it's sad what's happened.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Joe's got a good question for you guys. How does, or could Western Province as a union develop from grassroots schools to Western Province and beyond to improve rugby overall? I'll jump in there very quickly. Anton, you've had in fact, I'm going to go straight to you, Anton, because you've had a real, you've been quite vocal in the past. I love your Twitter account, mate. On the players that have been leaving the province, and we'll go and hark back to Varsity Cup here, and even in your own family, where we've seen players who have been the player of the tournament at Varsity Cup, and then next thing you know, they're at Grickwith, and then they're at Cheetahs, and then there's too many. It goes back to a disconnect again, doesn't it? And is this key moving forward? Is the communication the biggest issue at the moment?
I don't know if it's communication or whether it is politics. It's just insane for me that, and Patty's on the show tonight, and he'll probably be able to answer this better than I can. But in Daniel Jooste and Schalk Erasmus, who you know, Andy, they both played for Marty's in the Varsity Cup winning team last year. To allow them to go to the Sharks and the Bulls is just insane. It's insane for me. These are two of your most up and coming two hookers in the country. Bongi and Skara are coming to the sort of end of their careers and will, in all likelihood, move on overseas or to Europe or France or whatever. And Province are going to be without any quality hookers. And I'm just using a very sort of microscopic example.
Isn't it?
Yeah. And you do whatever you can. Now again, who needs to be held responsible for that? Is it the coach? I don't know how it can be the coach, because the coach can only convince a player to stay so much. But money talks, and you can see that both Daniel Jooste and Schalke Erasmus have got wonderful exposure. Chris Smith, another example, the Flower.
That's what I was getting at.
You
know? I can't go over that.
Yeah. So Chris Smith never, yeah. You know, Chris Smith, the player of the tournament in 2019, now at the Cheetahs, Griquas and then the Cheetahs. Why does he have to go there to get exposure, where he dominated the Varsity Cup? You know, I don't think he ever represented Western Province ever.
No, there's only a few there. I mean, like, you've got Ernst van Rijn still there. Edward van der Merwe is struggling. But Andrew, like, just watching that talent walk out of the door of a system that could be, I say it regularly, Andrew. It's like, you've got the location, you've now got the historical stadium, you've now got the new stadium, which is obviously going to take the spectator experience up to another level. You've got potential like Springboks playing Varsity Cup in Western Province. They're in the Western Province system and they're walking out the door. That's, like Anton said, disgraceful.
Yeah. In defence of Western Province, if you've got Paul Roos, Paul Boys, Paul Jim, specifically Bishops that have had obviously quite a good team this year, even Sachs, to keep all those guys, not easy to keep everybody, and they all want a chance to play, particularly when you've got a very strong senior team. But Anton quite rightly pointed out, strategically, we had to keep one of those hookers. Had to, no question about it. And those guys are shooting the lights out. I mean, Daniel Jooste is getting better and better and better each week. And he's pushing that chap. He's going to be a Springbok in a year or two's time. No question about that. Dylan Richardson as well. Yes, the Sharks have kept him. But here we're sitting with a problem. So I think strategically some mistakes have been made. I also understand the guys want a chance to play. But yes, it's a big concern where we have let a lot of good guys go. And I can promise you the guys want to stay. It's not a case the guys want to leave. Playing for Province is something special, but the guys want a chance. And I'll say something with Anton as well. His son, I think, was 7th or 8th in line for Western Province. Jean-Luc at one stage was 4th or 5th in line, and they almost needed 3 or 4 guys to get injured before he could play. So it's quite tricky. Some positions are loaded up quite heavily, and as Anton mentioned earlier, if guys aren't going to play, they're going to leave. Guys want to play, but strategically in key positions, I think we've missed a trick here with key players. And Anton can point out a lot more other positions where guys are doing really well. Youngsters like Chris Smith as well. I mean, he went to the Pumas. He was on the bench, am I right, Anton, for the Bulls most of last year, and you saw him a couple of weeks ago on form. He's tops.
Yeah.
So yes, no, it is sad to see the guys go, definitely.
And Andy, if I could just come in here, sorry to interrupt you, Patty. I think Western Province must be the only union in the world that doesn't have a CEO and doesn't have a director of rugby. So you tell me how a union can function without a CEO and without a director of rugby. No one's accountable. No one's making decisions. So I feel sorry for the coaching staff at the moment and the players, for that matter.
I completely agree with you. And my worry is, right, so say we have this conversation in a year's time, okay? Lions tour's gone. There's nothing left to play with. What does that Western Province / Stormers team look like? I mean, like, I haven't added up the caps. That are in there at the moment, but we're well into probably 400-500, I'd imagine. I'm pulling a figure out of the air. What does that Stormers team look like? Because if you listen to not even rumours, is it? It's like the worst kept secrets. Kit's off, like got a foot in the UK. Sia's got all sorts of interests around the world. He's only got a short career. Like he's going to commercialise himself. Let's be honest. Peter Steph de Toy, we've already seen issues with his contract. Like he said, Bongi, Scarra coming near the end. Genuinely, are we looking at Western Province becoming a second-rate province rugby-wise in a year from now if there's not huge dramatic changes?
Andy, the simple answer is it will be disastrous. Okay. After the Lions tour, it will be a disaster here in Western Province. I can tell you categorically that players will leave if the following doesn't happen. A clear strategy on where the union's going and what the objectives of the union are. B, an equity partner needs to come in ASAP. And the Marco Mazzotti consortium was acceptable to the players. They supported it. They liked what they heard from Marco Mazzotti and his consortium. And I personally know Marco, and I know 2 or 3 members of his consortium. They were doing this acquisition for the right reasons. They're sensitive to the political situation within South Africa. They understand transformation and they're happy to implement the principles of transformation. And it was a brilliant fit for Western Province Rugby. Sadly, those that made the decision never got back to them, never cooperated with them, and never dealt with them with respect. So until those things happen, Andy, it is going to be a disaster of epic proportions because players are leaving, they will leave to Montpellier and Toulouse and Bath and Wasps and Ulster and Leinster and Munster and wherever. And Western Province will be left with a club team.
But they'll make a fortune off stadium tours if they're going to charge what Mr. Moreira wants to charge, eh? Oh dear. It's just not in a good place, is it? And there's all sorts of things coming out of the woodwork. But let's hope that there's some proper governance going in there in the next. I don't know. What are we looking? January? Because January is that when the new CEO is going to be advertised and hopefully.
I think they're advertising now. They're appointing in January.
They're appointing in January. Okay, so Anton CHAIT, new CEO, January. Good. Heard it here first.
Thanks, but no thanks.
There's a couple of comments that Joe wants to chuck up on the screen there, if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Shepherd. Western Province is stuck ever since. Their latest solution is the same as the Natal, Transvaal, and lately Northern Transvaal, and that is to buy out Free State players. Easy way out, but bound to fail. Well, let's just touch on Free State Rugby. We've got to find the loophole and be independent, or bet them to win the next World Cup. France staying still going, I imagine. Let's touch on Free State because they're in a weird position now. Obviously, they could be playing rugby in Russia. Which, no offence to Russia, well, plenty of offence to Russian rugby, is not where the Cheetahs need to be. There is a back door there into European rugby, but it's only in the Challenge Cup. Andrew, where do you see the Free State moving forward, and how badly have they been treated by Saru?
Yeah, they were given an absolute shocker. I think it caught everybody off guard. What's always impressed me about Free State, what they've achieved with such little talent. And I take my hat off to all the coaches for the last 10 or 15 years. They have always been competitive and they've done incredibly well with what they've had. So they were given a huge raw deal. A name, No Man's Land, a friend of mine, Nilicho, his son, Renil's playing there, and guys aren't sure what to do. So they've been given a real raw deal. I just think it's been handled so badly. I don't know what to say. But they got my respect over all the years. As I said, they've done so well with little talent, and they've been super competitive. They've always boxed above their weight, and they've never failed to entertain. And with what they've had, they've battled to get, but they've made it on their own. But I think this is a death past this. I don't see them recovering here, to be honest.
No,
I think, yeah. Sorry, Andy.
No, go for it. I was just going to say, like, it seems like the only way they can survive is to produce players to sell them. Like Joe's just read up. There's also, it's not just Russia, it's Belgium, Germany, Spain. Like, again, no offence to those guys, but that's not where the Cheetahs should be playing rugby, is it, Anton? Oh, I know it isn't, but you know.
I disagree with that here. I think if ever there was a time for a union to sort of rise from the ashes and prove everybody wrong, because they do always bounce back. It's the Cheetahs, and if it means going through this Continental Shield and then gaining qualification to the Challenge Cup in Europe.
Yeah, they would. Yeah, they've challenged for the.
Unfortunately,
so not even. You know, it's not the top.
Yeah. They don't have much choice. Where else are they going to play?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they would stay in the Curry Cup, but that's just not. It's like watching the train leave the station, isn't it? We'll see you in a year. Like when you get back from your journey, it's just not good. It's not good at all. But
I just
think
Pro 14, and they didn't do badly. They didn't do too badly in Pro 14. So
I think that's the most disappointing thing, is that they sort of opened the door for South Africa to walk through into the European competition, which is rude just in itself. But also, you look at the improvement. We've had Reno Smith on a couple of times, great value. And he's kind of like, well, when COVID hit, we had 6 of our 7 games left were at home. I think they were top of their conference or very close to top of their conference. He was like, we were flying. Like, we had all these home matches to look forward to. He wasn't saying he was going to win. They were going to win the competition, but they were in a flipping good place for a chance for a South African team to finally sort of get up there and really sort of slam a marker down. But yeah, it's sad. It's sad. But we're going to get these Leinster boys on in a minute. We're going to give them some stick for being South African B team, obviously.
Yeah. Andy, what was always nice for these tours when the British Lions come and play, South Africa would always have like a midweek game against like a combined team on Free State on like a hot in the middle of winter, and you've got these Poms running on, and you've got these Afrikaners to tackle everything that they want to play themselves in the Springbok team. And invariably there would be a test like the following week, like in Brakpan, and these are like horrible places to play. And that field is like concrete, Anton, concrete, and a little softener. Bloemfontein was a little softener for test matches, so not nice to play there, boy.
I think that pitch in that in that stadium up there in the Free State Stadium now is probably a bit better than that. I'd hope so, anyway. But gents, we're gonna bring some people in here, and we're gonna have a chat probably about the Rugby World Cup, I imagine. So without further ado, the guys that are going to take over from us in about 10 minutes from Leinster Laighin. Have I pronounced that correctly? Possibly. My Gaelic's off. But let me first bring in my fellow host, Mr. Chef Pagano. How are you, sir?
Good to see you all.
Yeah, just quickly, Anton, Andrew, I'll translate if you need me to. It's fine, and I'm back the other way to Jeff as well. So I'm sort of getting used to the accent over here.
If it makes it any worse, I've got an American accent as well on top of it all. So,
geez,
so there you go. So you may need a double translate. That's it.
Yeah, get Gary. We'll get Gary. Where is he? Gary, log in. I'm going to let you introduce your guest rather than me doing a really bodged job of it. So please take the floor, Jeff.
Okay, no problem. Well, we've got a pair of we've got 2 Nathans joining us this evening on the Leinster Laighin. One you'll all know. He's played a few times for Leinster, played a few times for Scotland, the Lions, and loads of other teams all around Europe. So it's none other than Mr. Nathan HINES. I think Joe will pop him up there. There you are, sir. Welcome to the show, Mr. HINES.
Thank you. How are you all?
Very good.
Not too bad at all. And also joining us is another Nathan who I interviewed for my own podcast there during the week ahead of Northampton's game at the RDS this weekend. He's a Leinster fan, born and reared, but he's now living in England, and he's actually doing some media work for the Northampton Saints. So he was just a guy for me to talk to ahead of the game this weekend, and it's Nathan Johns. So put him up there. Evening, Nathan. How are you?
Not too bad. How are y'all?
And
Nathan, Movember's finished, mate. You can get rid of that now. Movember's. Are you keeping it seriously?
Yeah, well, I put in too much effort over November just to let it go. Nobody has to put up with it. So what's the harm?
Cool. I think Nathan, Mr. Hines. Let's go with Mr. Hines. It's fine. So is it Sir now? In Clermont, I've heard it's Monsieur. Guys, Nathan, let's go World Cup draw. South Africa versus South Africa B versus South Africa C, all in the same group.
Mm-hmm.
As a Scotsman, you're a little bit worried?
Well, South Africa are going to win. That's it's a good outcome, isn't it? Everyone's going to be happy. Well, yeah. I mean, like you were saying before, there's a lot of South African-born, raised players around, and they are good players, and obviously some other nations will try and pick them up. So it's no surprise, really. Obviously, you'd like to keep them all in South Africa, but I'm sure you've already said that professional sport lures them away.
Yeah, absolutely. But my question to you as a player,
Mm-hmm.
as an ex-player, if you were watching a World Cup draw that far out from a tournament with so much rugby, fingers crossed, touch wood, we're hopefully going to have a Lions tour of 2 or 3 more Six Nations. It's a bit weird, isn't it, doing that far out? There'll be so many world ranking changes.
As a player, you don't really care, I don't think. No, because who's going to be worrying about the World Cup? All you're really worrying about, especially if you're one of the home nations, is the Six Nations that's coming up, being picked for the team if you're not an automatic selection, and then you just try and get through to the World Cup, and then once you're there, then you worry about it, I think.
Definitely.
Jeff, I'm going to leave the next one to you.
Yeah, no, the on the World Cup draw, I mean, it's so far away. I mean, from Ireland's point of view, the problem we've been having recently is when we come up against it, we're able to beat teams like Scotland and Wales and Italy at home and stuff. But when we come up against teams like England and France, but particularly England has been our problem recently. And so the narrative here is that our team, we're not physical enough. And we're not, when we come up against physicality, we can't overcome that. So in a way, this is, even though it's 3 years away, it's a perfect draw for Ireland because, I mean, you were talking about Springbok aggression earlier. And this would be a perfect opportunity. I'd rather have a challenging game like that in the pool matches, because you're gonna have to face it at some stage in the World Cup. And now we've got 3 years. I think Angie Farrell said in an interview there during the week that we'll be playing them next November as well. They'll be coming to Dublin. Fingers crossed, all going well and everything. And then you have a Springbok tour and everything. So personally, I think it's good to have South Africa in our pool, because we're going to have to come up against that kind of team eventually anyway.
Anton, what about for you? The pool, you sort of quite calm about that pool that's been drawn out for South Africa. I mean, a lot of the rhetoric over here has been more about scared about the quarterfinals, which some people may see as arrogant, but they're the world champions. But generally speaking, you're feeling fairly confident about it.
Yeah, I agree with Jeff. I think we're going to have a really tough game against Ireland and Scotland, and it's good preparation for the pool games. I think it's I listened to Jacques Nienaber this week, and he says it's so far away, he's not even thinking about it, focusing on now. So, yeah. But what's quite exciting is I think France at home are going to be a real factor. If they can put 7 games together, I think they've got a really good chance at this early stage. I think it's going to be a good year for France.
Yeah, they're progressing well, aren't they? Jeff, you got some thoughts on Pro 16, I believe.
Yeah. So it's like one of the worst kept secrets, I think, in European rugby now is that the Pro 14 is going to become, well, the Pro 14, which now has 12 teams, but it's going to now expand to 16 with the South African teams joining. I'm just wondering what the boys, well, you were talking about that on your show earlier on as well, but what you thought about the prospects of those 4 clubs from the South African point of view joining the competition. Like, how do you think that's going to work out for the Stormers and the Sharks and all them?
Paddy, I'm happy to answer that.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I think it's a real breath of fresh air for South African rugby. I think to see teams from Ireland, Scotland, Italy, etc., coming in, hopefully playing at the Cape Town Stadium against the Stormers will be a wonderful event. You know, as I said to Andy on a previous show, we starved of entertainment here in Cape Town, rugby entertainment. And I think it'll be fantastic. I don't know if any of you have been to the Cape Town Stadium or have experienced it, be it for the Sevens or for the World Cup soccer or whatever it was. It's a really fantastic stadium. I just hope that we can that we'll see rugby there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an amazing stadium. My final question to Mr. Johns, Nathan Johns. In light of what's happened now that you are obviously working within the club scene as well as naturally you're a fan. Like we've all worked in these places, but you're still a rugby fan. Other than the obvious with COVID, what do you want to see? How do you see rugby moving forward in 2021, and how important is this? I'm going to speak like it is happening. We're going to pretend it is definitely happening. How important is this Lions tour to attract people back to our game? I think we're guilty of pushing people away a little bit at the moment.
Well, I guess it's hugely important, isn't it? Just for the obvious reason of it's going to draw the biggest audience out of any of the other international games. I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because, you know, there's the wider conversation that's going on about the international game at the moment. A lot of people were complaining about the Autumn Nations Cup and, you know, the style of rugby that was going on. And, you know, if you're talking about teams that prefer to defend and, you know, they like to kick between the 2 10s and they back their Ds, you know, a South Africa team and a team that's coached by Warren Gatland are probably going to be, you would associate things like that with sides like that. So I think we're going to probably see something similar. I mean, the optimist in me would like to think that we're going to see a tour of where that's not necessarily the case, where those complaints don't necessarily happen. But at the end of the day, I think given that it's a Lions tour, I think just a series that's just incredibly competitive would do absolutely wonders. And I think as much as people are talking about style issues and things, you know, France and England last weekend or the weekend before played a game where they both kicked the ball a lot, but everybody absolutely loved it because it was competitive. And I think sometimes style and games that aren't very close can sometimes be conflated when the two are quite different. And
sorry, I'm just going to cut in over you, Nathan. Can you take your headphones out and try your outer speaker? You sound like R2D2 at the moment.
exactly better.
No. Can you unplug the headphones? Is that?
Yeah, they're out. Yeah.
Ah, crikey. No, I'm having some real garbling issues.
Restart.
Yeah, we'll have to restart. I'm going to nip in with a question that's off script. I just want to know from Nathan HINES' point of view. Nathan, is Scotland still heading in the right direction for you? I know they had one bad result, and there's people still talking about consistency and the same old conversation. But are you happy with Scotland's progress at the moment?
Yeah, I think they are going the right way. They did have one bad result, but I still think that they'll probably get a 10 back playing for them that didn't really have that had played the third choice 10 playing for them, so, or maybe fourth choice. But you know, once they get over those injuries, then I think they'll be okay. I mean, Gregor runs a pretty tight ship. I think he's changed tact a little bit in regards to the way he coaches. I think he's giving a little more responsibility to the playing group, which I think can only help. I think they're growing a little bit together, a little bit more than they had the first 2 years. So I think their results aren't bad at all, and I think that they're still going in the right direction as a group.
Yeah, good stuff. Everyone's competitive. I think it's been great having Scotland playing some of the brand of rugby that they've been playing in the last few years. Anyway, Mr. Pagano, we are definitely cutting into your time, so we shall say adios. That's not what they say in South Africa, but we'll say it anyway.
Thanks again, Slán. That's what we'll say.
Yeah, there you go, mate. We're on the gin over here, so it's all good. It's all good.
Right, lads. Okay, thanks a million, and great show, and we'll talk to you soon.
Cheers, guys. Have a great one, and we'll see. If not, we're going to see you next Wednesday for the Christmas special.
Yep, please God, yeah, all going well.
There you go. We'll be there. All right, guys. Enjoy.
Okay.
Take care.
Take it easy. Right. Well, that just leaves myself and Nathan HINES for now. Welcome again to the show, sir. Good to have you on. What we're doing is on this show is we had Mike Ross there on a while ago, so we're slowly piecing together that 2011 winning team. Maybe by the year 2030, we'll have had them all on, at this point. But no, listen, we'll start you off by just maybe if you can talk a bit about what you remember from that time when you were at Leinster and leading up to that final in particular, but what it was like at the province at the time.
The province at the time, I remember we had an incredible team of experienced players. Of the names we had in there was ridiculous. To be fair, I came in after Lions tour in South Africa, and what really struck me was that they're all friends. They all really got on. They were really player led, and they cared about their team, their province, and that was amazing for me. Really, I came from Perpignan, and it was a little bit like that. I mean, we had some success, but it just wasn't the way it was at Leinster. Leading up the final, I don't remember because I don't which is quite topical, but yeah, I don't tend to remember stuff like that anyway. But I remember the day we were bloody awful in the first half, and we managed to piece it together in a second, mostly because our scrum got its butt into gear, and we stopped pushing so many balls and making so many errors. So, but yeah, I could remember playing. I think we played racing in the Heineken in one of the pool games, and off a line out, I could just see the ball singing across the back line. Everyone making yards. All the passes were on the money. Everyone was coming on the ball, and I was like, it was one of those moments where you sort of stop, but everything's still going. I'm like, these guys are really good. It was a real pleasure to play for Leinster.
Yeah, because it was like the way Leinster have progressed over the years, it's been kind of gradual. It's been gone in steps. We got to the first Heineken Cup, and then we kind of went sideways a bit. And then when you came along, we had 2 years, we got another one, and then we went up again, and then we went sideways. And now we're into a new era where, a lot of young players have come through. Leo Collins, Stuart Lancaster have brought this new band of players through, but there's still that tie-in to that era now with Sexton still playing. So, like, from what you've seen about what you've seen on the Leinster team now, like how does it compare? Like how would you compare today's side to the one you were in?
I think I think you can see a continuity from the side I was in. I think the strength of Leinster is that they've brought these guys through with an identity. They've been so attached to the province. They've played in a similar way. They've been coached in a similar way, and I think that they. They're not cutouts, but they're so similar. It's like a fabric of Leinster, and they are it now. You can't really compare them to the team we had because they're different. But that they're Leinster players. That they're part of something that that goes back further than our team as well.
Yeah, because I mean the one thing I notice nowadays is that like back in 2010, when someone would come up into the team, they'd they'd be sort of eased into the team kind of thing. Like someone like Gary Ringrose, they stick him on the wing for a few weeks before putting him in the center and the position he's meant for and stuff. And they try a few, just to get him used to the setup. But now these guys are coming straight in. They're coming straight in and starting. You had like James Ryan starting for Ireland before he played for Leinster, and it's nice. They're like you say, they're ready to go. When they come up, and it's the culture there.
But that's a good thing about the way they prepare. Their academy set up, the school set up. They're prepared, and the good thing as well with the provinces is that there's plenty of opportunity because the international players get taken out. They're looked after, and the younger players get time. I mean, look at the season this year. The younger players are getting a lot more time, and that benefits them. It benefits the club. And ultimately, it benefit the other players as well because they'll have a little bit more rest because they've got confidence in the younger players when they can play them.
Yeah, and just recently we saw the kickoff of the Champions Cup this season, and we had Leinster, starting off against Montpellier. The other night, they really, after the disappointment against, Saracens in the last competition and all that happened there, they really hit the ground running. I thought, did you got to see the game? What'd you make of it?
Yeah, I did. Obviously, I was at Montpellier last year, so I knew a lot of the players have changed. Obviously, the coaching staff's changed because I'm not there. but I think it's a good one for Leinster to get. Montpellier are struggling really. They're struggling to find any kind of identity. There's not much structure to how they want to play, and I think they just get a little bit lost when the heat comes on, which is one of the strengths of Leinster. Is they're very organised and they know exactly what to do pretty much any time. So I don't think Montpellier were great, but I think it's a good one for Leinster to get so they can prepare for the games that are coming.
Yeah, that's it. Do we have the other Nathan Joe? Do we have? Oh, there we go. Right on cue. I just say it and it happens. Brilliant. Welcome back, sir.
Can you hear us? Any better?
Yeah, it's all good. All good. Sounds all good.
Apologies for the.
No problem at all. Well, listen, we'll get you right into it there, man. We were just talking about the Champions Cup, and we're talking about Leinster playing, kicking off against Montpellier, and you were watching Northampton's game. I was chatting to you myself about it on the podcast the other night, but you were saying how it's just things haven't been going well for Northampton recently, and it wasn't the best of starts to the Champions Cup.
Yeah, well, they started off their season pretty poorly, but I guess that was to be expected. They had a reasonably big defeat away to Sale to kick off their campaign, but Sale with their massive South African pack, to be expected. They're going to be up there competing with Exeter this year, I think. And their performances have gradually improved as the season has gone on. They lost with a last-minute kick away to Bristol, and obviously we know what Pat Lam is doing something pretty special there at Bristol. So that an away win there, they were seconds away from that. And then the next week was obviously the Champions Cup game, and people are blaming the bounce of the ball off a post for a freak try for the score, and that's what led to the winning score. But ultimately, Saints kind of shot themselves in the foot by not converting the huge possession and territory advantage that they had, and that was down to basically any time they entered the 22, they made a handling error, which is very uncharacteristic of a Chris Boyd coach side. He coached the Hurricanes for their Super Rugby win a few years ago, so he's all about very incredibly high standard skill sets in his teams, and Northampton are no different normally. But you can tell that they're a side that's bereft of confidence at the moment because their skill set has kind of in the last couple of games has abandoned them. It's not often that side doesn't score any tries, and as much as Bordeaux were they were good with their line speed and intensity and the collision and all that type of stuff, Saints still shot themselves in the foot really by letting the game come down to that one kick and bounce the ball.
Yeah, and so just on a more general level, just going off script a bit here, but I just want to know what you think about the way the competition's set up this season. It's a once-off because of the times that are in it, but do you think it's going to make a change to the kind of teams that'll come out of the groups, the pools into the final 8, or is it just how? It's kind of all over the place, 2 pools of 12 and all this kind of stuff. Do you think it's going to make any difference, or are the players just going to go ahead and take each match as they come? Mr.
Yeah,
Hines.
right, okay. Yeah, I think there's an element of they need to make each game. There's not much room for error at all. Especially like you look at the guys like Exeter, they've got one COVID, so they've lost a game, so that's going to be really tough for them. But I do think that it just puts a little bit more pressure on. They need results and they need them a little bit more. You just can't drop games at all. Apart from that, look, everyone takes each game that they can. You can't start calculating things before, and they just look at games that are in front of them. But yeah, I think it adds a little bit more pressure the way it's structured.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's like the old way. They say if you lost two matches, you're out. I think this way, I can't see all 8 teams winning all their matches. So I think if you lose one game, you're still in with a shout. But then again, it depends on who you've got left. I mean, like you say, Nathan Johns, like Northampton, and they lost the first game at home, and now they have to go to Leinster the following weekend. So it's kind of an uphill battle for them. And then as for Exeter, I mean, that's the total worst case scenario. I mean, I'm a bit disappointed they're not. That there's absolutely no way they can try to maybe push that game down the line a bit, but obviously fixture congestion and Premiership and all this kind of stuff, it's not easy to do. But I suppose we just have to see how it turns out.
I think to pick up on your Exeter point, though, I think if there was one game that they had to not play, this is their best game away to Toulouse. I mean, Toulouse are going back to Sandy Park next month, and then they've got Glasgow away, who that should be a 5-pointer. So I think for them, they've still got quite a decent shout of pulling through. And if they get 2 5-pointers, granted a 5-pointer at home to Toulouse is not going to be easy, but if they pull through with 2 5-pointers, they've still got a decent shot of qualifying. Obviously, depending on where the results go. I mean, in terms of the format as a whole, I mean, yeah, I'm not really a fan of you lose one game and you're done. I think it definitely, people have been saying it all the time, but it definitely devalues the competition. We spoke about it the other day, Jeff, about how on BT Sport, Benjamin Kaiser was, having a pop at Chris Boyd for saying he was going to pick the kids against Leinster, and how it devalues the competition. And obviously French sides have done that in the past as well. I think the talk around Saints is that regardless win, lose or draw that game against Bordeaux, Boyd was going to pick a second string for Leinster, because I think the importance of the Premiership for them based on how poor their start to the season has been and how they're bottom of the table, and how the fact that, on a normal day, they're not going to get 2 wins against Leinster to keep them in the competition, let alone 1. So even if they had won that game against Bordeaux, I think the priority was always going to be the Premiership. So I guess that's just a question about the different structures of the different leagues and how that affects different clubs' attitudes to Europe. Which is a shame, because the whole relegation thing means Premiership clubs can't take it as seriously, whereas obviously the Irish clubs do, which is obviously a massive shame.
And on that point about the different leagues, Nathan HINES, how you played in them all. How do you feel? How do you feel? And I certainly have not. So how do you feel? How do they compare now? Like, how would you say that the differences amongst them when it comes to playing styles and week in, week out rugby? And I mean, obviously there's immense differences between them.
Yeah, there is. I think the top 14 is brutal and long. It starts. I was looking at the Premiership fixtures, and it ends in June, which is quite good. Seeing that the normal top 14 season will start in the middle of August and finish in June anyway. So, but it's brutal because they're just big humans. They smash into each other. It's a lot more combative, I think. Top 14, there's a lot more skill involved. There's a lot more running, a lot more ball in play. They're just different types of games, and I think you see that as well when you get to Europe. Well, not so much as more with the French sides now with the fitness, but with the top French sides. But when it comes to Europe, it's a little bit faster, and they just can't keep up. I think they struggle. Obviously, conversely, with the power game, with the teams from top 14, they have that. They might not be the fittest, but they've got a little bit more power.
Yeah,
and
do I quickly jump in, Jeff? I mean, I saying earlier that as a fan, it's really easy to not be a fan of this new European format with basically you lose one game and you've got it. There's no point in playing your first side. I guess the other flip side of that coin is from a player point of view. I mean, these guys they had like 2 or 3 weeks off in between the finish of last season and the start of this season. So you completely can understand why, from that point of view, even some teams without even losing a game, like Gloucester sent over a third string to France without it before, in round one. You can completely understand why, for player welfare reasons. The head coaches are just saying, look, we just can't go full bore into this.
Yeah, I mean, and I suppose with the three leagues being so different, and the clubs within them approaching their whole squads concept differently, that it makes for it's hard to get an identity for the European competition itself, whatever the format, because they're all coming from different places. But I suppose, I mean, it's the way we have to do it. And like you say, this season, everyone's just going to have 4 games and some places 3. But I suppose eventually when we get to April, fingers crossed, all going well, we'll have our 8 quarterfinalists and things will be back to whatever normal is. And we'll see how that goes. Well, listen, looking ahead to this weekend, anyway, we've got round 2. Well, what's left of round 2? We've had a couple of cancellations. I would have actually picked out Toulouse Exeter Chiefs as my match of the weekend, I suppose. So that's kind of gone. What is there any game standing out that you guys would be looking forward to? Anyone want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll jump. I mean, Exeter Toulouse was obviously the headline one. I mean, they had a great game in the semi-final a couple of months ago. I think without that, I think it's got to be, especially from the Irish point of view, it's got to be Connacht Bristol over in Galway. I mean, obviously, there's the obvious storyline of Pat Lam and John Muldoon going back to Galway, where they are obviously heroes over there after delivering that Pro 12 win. It's a huge shame that there's no crowd in for that one, because you can imagine the reception they would get would be pretty big. And then also, like, from an on the field standpoint, I mean, these are 2 teams that play really attractive style of rugby. I mean, you saw obviously Bristol shipped 50 plus to Clermont at home last week, but they scored quite a lot as well. And then obviously Connacht did quite well away in La Défense as well. So I mean, both of these 2 teams play a really, really attacking style of rugby. And unlike other English teams, Pat Lam has said, even though he's lost, he's going over there. He said in his press conference he's going over there full throttle, like he wants to win, even though he lost first up. So that one should be a cracker.
And then you got Munster going to Clermont. How do you see that one shaping up?
Well, it's always difficult place to play, Marcel Michelin. But I think if anyone can do it, so the last game they lost against Montpellier. It was probably the best game Montpellier's played all year. So we know how proud Clermont are about the home patch. So it's going to be a difficult ask for Munster. But that's the kind of European fixture that we all love seeing, isn't it? Munster Clermont, Clermont Munster. So. I think it's going to be an amazing game. Munster need to go and knock Clermont off, but this will be the game where Clermont need to say, look, we didn't do well our last game at home, and this is us trying to prove a point.
Yeah, and like we're saying, Nathan Johns, your Northampton Saints they're going to your Leinster on Saturday lunchtime. Like we were saying, you were saying the bookies had them at a 40-point spread or something like that, or something crazy number. I suppose it depends on what kind of teams they're going to put out, but you can't really see too far beyond a home win there, can you?
No, not at all. I mean, I very much see a similar sort of outcome in game to the Aviva Stadium game last year when the 2 sides played. Saints sending over a mixed 15. I don't think he's going to completely go at the kids, because there's a lot of guys coming back in from the internationals who he needs to bed back into that side before they have a crucial Premiership stretch coming up. So they need some game time, but he'll mix that with some of the younger guys for sure. He said as much. And it doesn't really matter, as we saw on the weekend, it doesn't really matter what string or Leinster put out. I mean, they probably don't look at it as first, second, or third 15, do they? But it doesn't matter what side they're going to put out there. You'd expect them to put 40, 50 up, especially because Saints have struggled on the defensive side a lot this year.
Yeah, I agree with you. Still gonna have fingers crossed. Still superstitious, but hopefully that's the way it's gonna pan out. Okay, well, like I say, it's a shame that there's been a couple of matches cancelled in that group of matches, but there still should be a lot of interest there. So we'll see how that goes. But just for now, I want to talk to Nathan HINES about what you're doing now at the moment. You've taken up a new role with the Gallagher Premiership. Want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I'm development director with Gallagher, and I look after the PRL relationship. Obviously, we're title sponsors of the Premiership, so Hugh Vivian was in this role before myself, and he's just transitioning out. He's got another role, so my job is to keep the relationships with the clubs, make sure they're okay. We're official broker for most of the clubs of the Premiership, so it's a big job. Make sure that we are looking after. We've got a transition program for players as well, where we look to bring one player from each club through, upskill them, so there's something for them, hopefully with a view to work for Gallagher when they finish playing rugby. So it's challenging, but I started in November, and it's been lockdown here for that first month. So it's been difficult, but quite rewarding, I think, just to be able to meet new people and start something different.
Yeah, that's great. And Nathan Johns, you said that you were, you're working with, you're in and around the Saints, and you know a bit about the the makeup of the club there. Like, I mean, it's how much does the what's the kind of identity that the Saints have with connecting with the community and the fans and all that kind of stuff? Do you notice, like, compared to what happens in Leinster, and how do they go about that?
I mean, yeah, it's huge. I mean, Northampton's a small town, and the Saints are by far and away the biggest show in town. Whereas, obviously Leinster being in Dublin is a lot more to compete with. They're part of the community outreach is huge for them. The Northampton Saints Foundation is a huge part of the community there, and they did lots of work during lockdown. They had players doing what they can, and a lot of injured players spend a lot of time working them as well. Like we talked about Harry Malander the other day, and how he tore his cruciate a couple of years ago, and he had 15 months out. And he's spoken in the past about how during those 15 months he worked with the foundation, and that kind of gave him a lot of perspective on his rugby career, because it is charity work after all. So so they're huge in the Northampton community, and as a result of that, I mean, even though they're on a horrific run, 13 losses in a row, they're still absolutely beloved by the community there. They're by far and away the biggest show in town.
Yeah, that's great. And well, just to change tack a little bit, I think we've gone through all our topics already, and we've got a lot of time to go. So let's move on to the Lions tour coming up this summer. The Irish going to the Ireland, or the Lions are going out to South Africa again. Hopefully, all going well. How do you see that going? Do you think that the team is going to be mostly based of England players, or what? How can you see the team shaping up there?
I think on form at the moment it'd be mostly England players, but there's a lot of rugby between then and now and then. Injuries play a big part. I mean, even guys that are selected in the Lions group. We had, I think, Jerry Flannery dropped out of our Lions group. He was selected, and before he even got on the plane, he was already on his way home. So, it just depends on form, really. But as it turns out, well, it's not just form, but who they want to bring into the group. How does the group get together? The people that they're going to pick. It's more than just form. I think it's about personality as well. Who to put together.
And what do you think, Nathan Johns? I mean, I know it's a long way out. Whatever, we have a whole Six Nations to go to go between now and then. So a lot of play. But we've had a bit of rugby, a bit of international rugby since the lockdown. So is anything? Have you got any early thoughts about what could be happening ahead of that tour?
Yeah, I mean, and being in and around English media communities, they're all pretty confident that it's going to be very much an English dominated squad. Which if the squad if they were traveling tomorrow, you can't really argue against that. You're going to have to see how they got on in the Six Nations. Obviously, they've got to travel to Dublin, which is in theory, hopefully will be a different proposition. So I think, yeah, you definitely see lots of English guys going. The point that Nathan HINES made about character and what they want from people, that's a really interesting one, because does he, for example, in the back line, if he wants those two leaders, then there's the argument that the Sexton Farrell axis worked well last time. You've got two very big leaders there, but maybe he doesn't want those two in the same side again. Who knows? From an Irish point of view, I mean, they're the obvious names. Scrum half is definitely up for grabs, I think. So Connor's got a shout. I'd love to see Caelan Doris get a go as well. Obviously, I think he's got Billy Vunipola ahead of him at the moment. But I'd love to see him get a go. I'd love to see Gary get a go as well. Ringrose, after he missed out, I think he was one of the reserves last time. So I'd love to see him get a go as well, because I think 13 is potential one for him as well. So I think, I think plenty of Irish guys will go, but it's a question of how many will actually get in the 15. Obviously, all these conversations are just completely irrelevant at this point in time, so far out. But as a fan, they're interesting ones to have.
Exactly. As fans, we love selecting teams. It's all about what team do you want, and it always falls into two categories. You got people who try to pick the team that the actual coach in place is going to put out, but most of us, we put out the team we would pick, because that's always 10 times better, and it's always definitely going to win all the matches. But I think, Nathan, John, you have a question for the other Nathan there. Why don't you put it in there?
Yeah, I mean, also obviously, thinking with your like Scottish hat on, and obviously, you used to have one foot in the Irish setup as well. There's been a lot of, obviously, you've probably seen all the talk about the chain of events where Danny Cipriani left Gloucester, Adam Hastings is going from Glasgow to Gloucester, and there's talk that Glasgow are in for Ben Healy. And obviously that means he's going to have to pick between Ireland and Scotland. I was listening to something earlier on the radio today, Ronan O'Gara was on, and he basically just said, look, for the kid like this, it comes down to a decision of whether he wants to play for Ireland or whether he wants to play for Scotland. I mean, obviously you're somebody who played for a different country from where you were born. So I'd love to get your insight on this. Is it as simple as that? Is it as simple as you just want to play for one country or the other, or is it more difficult than that?
I think for me, I was a bit of a enigma, because I played rugby league when I was a kid in Australia, and then I moved to Scotland. I played rugby for 2 years before I moved to Scotland, and never thought I'd play professional rugby. It wasn't like an aspiration of mine, like professional sport, yeah. And then I started Division 2 rugby in Scotland, and then got a professional contract. So I sort of, I didn't fall into it, but I felt I'd lived there a couple of years, and I didn't go there just to play for a country. I sort of organically grew into playing for Scotland, like any other Scottish player was. I mean, there was like Brendan Laney, who came in from New Zealand at the time after myself. He flew in on the weekend. We played New Zealand in Perth on a Tuesday night, Scotland Day, and then he played a test match on the weekend. He hadn't even played a club game. I mean, that's a little bit different, but it is when you are in that opportunity, in that position. Sometimes you just have to pick, and sometimes what motivates you. Do you want to play for a country where you're born and raised and your friends are there, or is it have you got other aspirations? Is it that you'll get more game time? Will that mean you'll get paid more? Will that mean your career will last longer? I mean, there's a lot of other things to. In my case, that wasn't for me. That wasn't the case. But I know, like Cam Redpath, he's in the same position. He's at Bath, and his dad played for Scotland. He's Scottish qualified. He's played for England under 20s. But I know that Scotland would be keen on him going back up to Scotland, and so he might be another person that just has to choose. So Rogers, he's kind of right.
Yeah. Okay. And in terms of that, I mean. But then the flip side of that, though, is obviously we don't know how much to buy into all this chat around them being interested in him or not, or whether he's actually interested in going. I mean, there's been famous instances before of, like, there was that famous picture of Brian O'Driscoll, in Biarritz in January, and then the agent released it or whatever it was, just to try and get a few numbers on. I mean, is that game? Does that game actually go on in your experience?
100%. Of course it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, have you not noticed when I was at Montpellier, every person that was up for contract was getting linked to Montpellier because they had a billionaire owner.
Yeah, true.
And I knew, I thought I did. Hopefully, no. But I knew that some of it was just what you read the paper. So, agents are smart. They know what buttons to press, and but yeah, definitely, whether it goes on as much as it used to, I don't know, but it definitely happens.
Yeah, I mean, from the point of view of what Ben Healy, say it is happening, and Ben, they are making advances, putting it to Ben that he could play for Scotland. I mean, it is a decision that has to be made. I mean, we had your man from the previous show was talking about how like Ireland is currently like South Africa B or South Africa C, whatever. I mean, you've got a situation where you've got players in certain positions coming up through the ranks in South Africa and New Zealand especially, but now it's happening in Ireland too, where they're coming up and they're top level players in their position. But when they get to when they're going to start playing test rugby, there's 2 or 3 people already there ahead of them. And you're wondering if they commit to that country, they could fight for their place. Of course they could, but if they want a career playing test rugby, there might be options elsewhere. So I suppose, and then you've got, of course, the agents behind the scene are also putting the feelers out there for them and getting them a load of options so they can get them the right deal. So it's part and parcel of the game of rugby at the moment. And I suppose if Ireland has got a situation where we've got players that are being courted for other nations, it's happening to us now instead of us always going to other countries. I suppose that's a good sign, the kind of talent we've got here in Ireland.
Well, I think it is. I think it's a bit of a compliment, even though it's not comfortable, but it's still a compliment. Or is it a compliment? Is it that but you don't need those players that you've brought in from other countries? So I know that when I was at Leinster, we had Dev. I was in Devin Toner's place. I left, and he flourished. And look at him now. He's extremely bald and extremely successful and old, and played a lot of games. But so that's the flip side of the coin as well. Like, is it because the academy system is good and they've got good players, or is it because there's if there's Irish players, Irish born and bred players in front of them, that's a really good place to be. If it's someone that's just been a project player, which even project players are there for a long time before they play for Ireland. So
yeah, well, I think that's why there's been like so much chatter around this, is because people are looking at this and taking it seriously. Because there's been a lot of people worried about who's going to take over from Johnny when Johnny eventually goes, and he wants to do a Tom Brady and never retire, and fingers crossed he does. But
he's got 2 World Cups left in him still, I'd say.
but the fact is, I mean, like everybody really likes Harry Byrne. People, Joey still has to come back, and there you go. There's already 2 guys there potentially who may or may not be blocking Ben Healy. So I guess that's why people are taking this so seriously, is because, like you said, that just at the moment there is that depth at the same age. Granted, it's probably in terms of at half, it's probably not at the stage where they're pushing Johnny under pressure yet. But in 2 years, who knows? Maybe he's looking at that, maybe he's not. But I guess
look at the other is if he goes to another club, he could get more game time. He doesn't have to pick right away. He's not getting picked for Scotland. Or he can play, get more experience, and he can always go back to play for Ireland. Like it's not. I don't think it's as desperate as it sounds. Just it's a little bit inflated in the press. So until he has to make a decision, he doesn't have to make one. Just play rugby and get better at what he does.
Definitely. And so like moving on from there, and more of a general question, I suppose. Like we were talking earlier about the World Cup in 2023, so that's a good bit away, but a lot of rugby to be played between now and then. But how do you see the game? What do you see for the future of the game as a world? From a broader sense, like in terms of getting in new fans and as a public spectacle, and so how do you see the game progressing? Is like it's been tough coming out of COVID. We had to reorganize and regroup and get back, and it's affected different countries differently. But how do you see the game, not just as a spectacle, but as a on the pitch, the styles of play? How do you see it progressing over the next few years?
Yeah, mate, you want to go? You can take this one. I need time to think about this one.
Yeah, you're obviously.
Don't make him easy. You're obviously
much more qualified, Nathan HINES, to talk about this than I am. I think the first thing that comes to mind is I think obviously it's all the stuff that's been coming out with Steve Thompson recently. You know, something's going to change. We don't know what, and I suspect it's going to take a long time for them to figure out what's going to change about, you know, if it's tackle height or whatever it is, and that probably won't come into effect before the next World Cup, because that's going to take a while, a lot of research. Obviously that's another can of worms and a different conversation. But I guess they're going to have to do something, I think, about teams defending 13, 14 men in a line. You know, they're talking about, you know, Nathan, you've got your rugby league background. They're talking about the kick, the rule where, you know, you bounce it into the 22 from inside your own half, you get the ball, there's stuff like that. That's been on the plate for a while. That's kind of, they were talking about that during the summer. I don't know what's going on with those type of things, because, you know, if you've got 220 kilogram men running into each other, and there's, you know, there's not going to be a lot of movement, there's not going to be a lot of space, and, you know, with 14 men in the line and 1 man in the backfield and rush Ds, meaning that kicking in behind is difficult. You know, I think they're going to have to try and do something to change that, and try and open up a bit more space. Because I mean, I think in terms of rugby league, there's a lot more space, and they seem to be much more open games, because they don't like this kicking the ball away and defending as plan A. I don't think World Rugby likes that. I don't know how drastic they're going to be with that, but I mean, from my own personal point of view, I would like to see something that encourages teams to play with a bit more space.
Yeah, and when it comes to, I mean, that is the point. That's the way the game's been evolving. It's the defensive coaching that's kind of taken over, dictating how teams are approaching the match. I mean, I think we saw this Leinster Montpellier. I mean, literally from the kickoff, before the Leinster defense had even had a chance to set, you had Montpellier taking 3 points whenever they could. They could have kicked to the corner, but they didn't. And then you had Leinster kicking the other way, knowing that if once we put the ball down in their 22, they probably wouldn't get past us. And when the defenses are that strong, it's just But you see, the flip side to that is, if they change the rules a bit, the defensive coaches just get that much clever and come up with something else. You know, that kind of way. It's kind of a chasing it back and forth. You know.
I think to be fair to Leinster, though, they're one of the sides that definitely does play a more attractive brand. I mean, you can make the argument that it's only been against Pro 14 opposition this year, but like they've, you know, Harry Byrne has been running the ball from deep, God, almost every game so far this year. Obviously, he didn't play when he did. He was on the bench. But you know, so to be fair to Leinster, I don't think we can accuse them of being boring. Yes, they probably kicked a little bit more than they normally do against Montpellier. But I
wasn't saying they were being boring. I was just saying they were playing in such a way because they knew they had the defense. I mean, like you say, Leinster have been playing more creative players at 12, like Kieran Frawley and Jimmy O'Brien, and letting them do the deciding. Just on this particular day, they were kicking more just to suit that particular game. But yeah, no, you're right. It's Leinster wouldn't be Leinster have a good defense, but they more strings to their bow as well.
I think internationally it's a bit different as well, because all about international rugby, it's just about minimising risk and minimising making mistakes. And if you're going to make one, make sure you make it in the opposition half. So that's why I think England have been criticised for the way they play, because one mistake can cost you a game, and if you're going to have that mistake, you want it as far away from your try line as possible. But that's all it is, really. It's just minimising risk and backing defence. So, but like you said, that's not conducive sometimes to the best spectacle.
I think the flip side of that is, and it might be a bit of a redundant point to make, but obviously you're going to make more mistakes in international rugby when the stakes are higher, right? So obviously you're going to want to, like you said, minimise that as little as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely. Now I think Joe has a video to put up for that Nathan wants to share there. Yeah.
Let's have a look.
Oh, we know this one. This is what this is the try from the game.
That's when Scrums had you're a little bit further back, a little bit more.
An actual engage.
Actual hit. Yeah.
That's a serious carry from Jamie.
Yeah,
that's good.
Good clean out there, Nathan. Serious clean out there.
Trying to make some space for Shawnee.
Yeah, there was a completely different attitude in that second half, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, not just attitude. I think that we just made so many. Like we've made a lot less errors. Scrum was a lot better.
Could you see the try line here, Nathan?
No.
Are you ready for it?
Of course.
You're just.
I only tried to score for Leinster in 2 years.
Yep. I wasn't going to say that, but I'll let you. Yeah.
Oh, it's the truth.
Great
I hate
stuff.
scoring tries.
What was your preferred position? Was it 4, 5, or 6?
I really didn't care.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I played 6 when after injury normally because playing second row is tough and you just run out of legs. But I quite enjoy playing back row just at the end mostly. But second row is a really good position to play. Yeah, there's Alvey. So look at his curly hair.
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
No, you go on.
Okay.
I was just going to say, I mean, because everybody talks about, and all the books and documentaries that have come out about that game, everybody talks about Johnny's halftime speech.
Yep.
But I think, and people have spoken about it, but probably a little bit less. And I guess as the tight head lock, were you the tight head lock that day? You were.
I was, yeah, behind Rossi.
Yeah, as the tight head lock, you must have been somewhat involved in the chat at halftime with Rossi about the scrum. I mean, was it simply just a technical change? Was that really it? Or was it?
It was really. I think we were trying to fight our own, especially the front row, trying to fight their own battles, and half time gave us a little bit of time to regroup and say, hey, look, we can't just go off and try one-on-one with these guys, and we have to work together to get the scrum sorted out. They were cheating. They come and walk around Rossi, but we had to figure that out and how to problem solve so that it didn't happen in the second half. And I think we got it together. Well, we did get it together.
I mean, the overall, like when we were talking to Mike Ross earlier, it was just a question of the sense was you needed a mindset. I suppose it's the same in every game, no matter how far you're behind. But this game isn't over. We're still in this. We can get back into this. We can win. And of course, you're going to say that. But I mean, especially when like Northampton scored just before the break and stuff, it was a long way back to get into. But it was just you obviously went out there. You had your plan in mind, fixed the scrum, and work from there. And you're just able to get it going.
During the whole game, even though we were down by that much, I never had a sense of it was gone. The game was gone, which is a testament to the team and testament to like how we were as a squad. So we didn't really think it was too far gone, something we couldn't overcome. And then obviously a couple of a score in and just gave us a bit more of a boost. And Northampton played against Leicester the week before, I think in a semi-final, and that would have taken a bit of a toll. But if we didn't have that belief as a squad, we would have never have done that in the second half.
I think the thing about that game as well is that obviously on the scoreboard, Saints were up and dominant, but I guess, and obviously may looked good whenever they entered the 22, whatever. But I guess the narrative of the miraculous comeback kind of sometimes forgets how many opportunities Leinster created in that first half. I mean, there was the one where there was an offload. I think it might have been Jamie who gave the offload. I can't remember who it was to Brian in the 22, and the ball didn't go to hand. I think Ben Foden made it a good scramble or something like that. I mean, so I think the game was incredibly open as it was, and Leinster probably saw themselves unlucky / the last pass didn't go to hand to make it mean that the deficit wasn't 22-6 at the break. So I guess, when you're in the game and you're creating try scoring opportunities, it's not like you were just defending on your own line the whole time. So, obviously you're going to feel in it when those chances are coming.
Yeah, and that was a most disappointing thing. We created chances and let them off the hook. So we couldn't build any pressure. And then when we had a scrum, we were getting poleaxed, and it was just too easy for them. So that was sort of the story of the first half. But, in the second half, we sort of sorted that out and kept a bit more pressure on them, which obviously paid off. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Brilliant memory. Okay, well, listen, we're going to wrap it up in a minute, lads. I'm just going to have it just quick ask you both, like, what's 2021 got? I mean, Nathan HINES, you were talking about, your new role and stuff. But in general, in rugby terms, what's 2021 got in store for you? Is just getting settled into the new job and everything?
Yeah, new job. I'll be able to watch rugby without having analysed it to death, which is actually quite nice. So part of the job is that we've got we get tickets at games. So it'll be really nice when we're allowed back in to go and watch a game socially and meet up with with friends that I've made while I've been playing or coaching, and see them under the pump actually while I'm watching from the stand.
And Nathan Johns, you're back in Dublin now for the Christmas time, but you're back over for the New Year, yeah?
Yeah. So the immediate future is the game on Saturday, going in there with Saints. Then after Christmas, going back over there, finishing college, hopefully get into the return game in Franklin's Gardens, which there actually, as things stand, there will be fans at. There will be 2,000 fans of that. Obviously, it depends on how the UK tiered system changes, if it changes. Beyond that, finish college, and hopefully kind of the opposite of Nathan. I want to get further into rugby rather than take a step back. So hopefully there's some sort of media gig for me at somewhere. Don't know where that it will be yet, but yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan, but love covering the game as well. So hopefully that materializes.
Brilliant stuff. Well, listen, best of luck to both of you, and thanks for giving us your time this evening to talk about matters rugby. We're going to leave it there. Just a couple of points here about what's coming up now on the Three Blokes network on Monday from MSG Tours, the Lekker Lounge episode 3, looking at the Lions tour and all things South Africa with South Africans and Springboks scout Brits. So he'll be on there on Monday. And then on the Wednesday, we've got the ThreeBOD Rugby Group Christmas Party live show full of special guests, music, and Christmas crack. So there you go. Thanks again. We're going to leave it there. And thanks for tuning in, everyone. And we'll talk to you next time on the Leinster Laighin. Thanks again. See you, lads.
Cheers, boys.
Cheers.